A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, a great adventure took place.
Talking Bird, a special edition.
Hello and welcome to Talking Bird, the special edition, episode 82. I'm your host, Robert Zachary, along with my co-host, John Llewellyn. How's it going, John?
Doing well. Welcome back.
Yes. Taking a little brief...
To everyone listening, I guess.
A brief hiatus. Well, I think we're the only podcast that Star Wars podcast that hasn't done a show in the last 2 weeks. That's actually still
probably.
It's like
I mean, what is there to talk about, really?
Really?
This is the slow period. This is the lull.
Yeah, I mean, we spared our listeners a reaction, and then a reaction to the reaction, and then a reaction to the reaction of the reaction episode. So I'm not throwing shade on anybody. I had to kind of make a rule for myself not to listen to a lot of those reaction shows, just to keep my reactions my reactions. Then I can listen to everybody else's good points after I make my bad points. You know what I mean? It's that kind of situation where
right.
It's like there are so many podcasts out there doing their reactions. We're the what do they call that? The light measured reaction episodes. We've had time to think about it. And of course
you've heard the hot takes.
Yes, exactly.
Now come for the measured, tempered, clear-headed reactions.
Exactly. We don't have I don't think either one of us have any freshly healing Starkiller based tattoos on our arms or anything like that. Which I guess a lot of people for people who don't know, Star Wars Celebration was last weekend, and that was it's what would you call that? It's the Christmas for Star Wars fans now. I mean, basically,
well,
maybe not, because
we've talked about this before. I mean, it started kind of as a fan convention, right? Or maybe not.
I think it's always been officially
as a fan convention. But it began a decade or so ago, where we had we were post prequels, and it was like, all right, that was kind of it. That was going to be all right. We're not going to get any Star Wars anymore, any movies anyway, and so. Yeah, it's turned into this thing now where it's basically Lucasfilm advert. It's a weekend-long advertisement for Lucasfilm and Star Wars, right? And yeah, fan engagement and the cosplay and people connecting with one another as part of the fan community. That's certainly part of it, but like this is a 4 day long advertisement for Star Wars related products now.
Yeah, and than
anything else, I think.
Just to get the timeline, actually the first celebration, I'm looking at this at Wikipedia, I was thinking, gosh, I thought there was celebrations during the prequels, and there were. So the first one was in April of 99. So it was 18 years ago. And they haven't done them. I did one in 2002, which for the movie, 2005, 7, actually it looks like
they weren't annual necessarily.
They actually even did, I haven't been keeping up, but they did 2 of them in a year. They did one in May and then one in July of 2007. And then,
so like 2-3 months apart.
Yeah. So I guess this whole idea of having, there was this one in 13 in Essen, Germany, which I think 2013, if I'm not mistaken, I think that might have been either before or what after when Disney bought Lucasfilm. So they've basically done 3 in 3 years. Anaheim, Europe, and Orlando.
I could have sworn they've been annual for a while, but I guess they didn't do one in 2014 for whatever reason.
Oh, yeah.
But they've been almost annual since 2012, really. With the exception of 2014. And yeah, so they'll flip, so one year they'll be, it seems like the way it's going to go is Orlando one time, then over in Europe, then in Anaheim, California, then in Europe, Orlando, Europe, California, Europe, etc.
And that's the.
I guess I wonder if they hold these. I guess the first few were in Denver and Indianapolis, but from now on, I wonder if they're ever going to hold one of these in a place that doesn't have a Disney World of some kind, or a theme park.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine them at this point not doing it next to a theme park. Although there's not a Disney theme park in London, so maybe
there isn't. I guess I just assumed there was one.
It's the nearest Disney there is in Paris.
Oh, I don't know why. I knew that was Euro Disney. That's the infamous Euro Disney. I guess I just assumed that there were more of them in Europe now, but maybe not.
No, the only thing that I think they have over in England right now is the Harry Potter experience. Outside of whatever, but I don't know if there's any other major theme parks in the UK. But anyway, I guess the one consistent thread going through all of these things is that neither one of us have ever gone to one. So it's kind of like I've always said for years. I used to say, this year I'm going to go. This year I'm going to go, and that's always that thing when it starts to get close, and I start looking at. It's like sometimes it's like, well, do I really want to go to Indianapolis? I really probably should have gone to the one in Anaheim, but it was just wasn't possible that year. And I guess they're taking a break in 18. So I know for a fact they're taking a break, and then the next one's in 19. I assume that's going to be, so obviously they're not going to have something centered around the Han Solo movie, but I guess 19 will be, I bet you anything it'll be in Anaheim, and it'll be for episode 9 and whatever. But long story short, yeah, John's assessment is pretty right that what these have kind of, they started out as and have continued to be is kind of a heavy promotional area for all things Lucasfilm and Star Wars. And I feel like, well, if one thing hasn't changed is like that is definitely was the focus of this year's celebration. We obviously had a kind of a special anniversary this year, which technically hasn't happened until next month, but would be the 40th anniversary of Star Wars, meaning the actual first film, and then they wanted to promote. Obviously, the teaser for Episode 8, The Last Jedi, and so I guess and
then Season 4 of Rebels is starting in the fall,
right?
So they wanted to promote that, and I guess some people even got to see the first episode or the first half of the first episode.
Oh, yeah.
And then they have Battlefront 2 that they'd released the kind of teaser for, trailer for. That they're doing. Similar to what they did with Journey to the Force Awakens, they're doing Journey to the Last Jedi, books and comics. So they talked about lots of stuff that they're promoting that's going to be product out there for people, either in movie form or like actual tie-in products.
Yeah. So I guess, now that we're into this for a few minutes, I realize are we burying the lead a little bit about the teaser?
Oh, absolutely. Right. So this was big.
Maybe we should do that first.
So we have a teaser, which I don't know how you felt. I honestly thought that we were just going to get one of those behind the scenes sizzle reels like they did with Force Awakens,
right?
Celebration, that we were going to get 2-3 minutes of clips of the cast talking about how much fun it is to be back on set, and how they're excited to be working with Rian Johnson, and he's taking the story in a unique direction, blah blah blah, and we'll get to see extras or background aliens kind of half dressed, and maybe we'll get we'll look at the frame of some ship on a gimbal, and maybe we'll get a brief look into the creature shop with unfinished costumes or whatever. But we actually got a teaser, and so let's cut to the chase. Robert, what did you think of this teaser?
Well, they dropped that on Friday, so it's Wednesday now, so it's been 5 days since it's been out, and I've gone a lot of different directions in how I felt about it. But I will give you my first blush response, my Voight Kampf test version. My first one was I was underwhelmed. I was I don't know what I was expecting, and I know I've said a lot about this thing that Adam Driver has said about, like, he would really prefer that there had been no trailer and that people could just walk into this kind of, knowing it's a Star Wars film and not having a lot of the information put forward. But I think this is as close as you can get to kind of achieving maybe Rian Johnson, maybe Lucasfilm in general is kind of in that kind of, maybe this is their version of doing that, of kind of like, let's give the people as little information as we could possibly do and still have a a trailer that would satisfy, fans. I mean, I just, what it is? It's like that kind of very visceral, emotional thing when I watch it, when they do these teasers, and I, definitely got it. This would be an analog to this would be the teaser, which would involve, just the shots of like Finn jumping up in his stormtrooper costume, what was it? It's been so long, I don't have it note for note in my head, but the reveal of Kylo Ren igniting his lightsaber, the voiceover of Snoke, and then the Falcon doing that loop-de-loop and then cutting back into this thing. And it was like, I don't know what, it didn't hit me like that. And maybe there's no way you could possibly top that. Just the kind of disorientating, thing like, wow, that's a black guy in a stormtrooper costume. It's a lightsaber, but it's got 3 things. And then you're like, who's this voiceover? What is this? And then, the Millennium Falcon. And it's like this weird thing of like anxiety and excitement and mystery turned around with like a little bit of familiar. And I feel like maybe the Last Jedi teaser, it didn't give you that. I didn't feel like I got a lot like mystery into it. It's like I expect that in episode 8 Rey will be tested, because it's like, I keep thinking of like the Ring theory. It's like, well, it's going to be okay, there's no Jedi just shows up. People have said, like, one of the criticisms, like, oh, Rey seemed to be really way too apt in her Jedi skills for having no training. I personally feel that might be a clue to her origins. But then it's like, yeah, we know that she's going to train. We know that we also know that like Finn is going to be in the action. It's like, and so showing him in a medical capsule unconscious, to me was like, well, that's not really mysterious, because we know he's going to be all right. The big takeaway is obviously the thing at the end where, the only truth he knows is that the Jedi have to end, which is said by Luke, which I found really strange that people were asking at Celebration or whatever, is that Luke's voice? And it's like, well, obviously it's Luke's voice. But that being said, it's called The Last Jedi. So the idea that we knew that there's going to be some kind of, reorientation of the Jedi as a group, it's implicit in the title. So even that, as much as I want it to be like, oh, it really wasn't for me, and I'm not trying to be smug about it, but I honestly felt, well, that's going to be addressed. This whole idea of like, what is the Last Jedi? So I just felt like it was trying to be mysterious, and it didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't achieve that. But that being said, I think that their task was almost after that teaser in 2014, I guess. I think it's almost it was an insurmountable task. So it's not like a thing where it's like, oh, I wasn't taken aback. I wasn't super excited about it, but now I'm in a complete, free fall about my expectations about this movie. I just feel like in some respects it's like, yeah, there's no way they could have topped the Force Awakens teaser, so maybe I think maybe this was an attempt and it was I think it was a miss, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and it's, I mean, this is something that's obvious, and I feel like shouldn't have to be stated, but I also feel like should also maybe be put more upfront about these things when, not just us, but when other, anyone talks about trailers or teasers for these movies, right? The people who actually made the movie are not the people putting this trailer or this teaser together, right?
Correct.
There's like a different set of editors, and it's essentially the marketing department doing it, right? It's not like Rian Johnson didn't have really any input into how this trailer should be put together, aside from maybe saying like, don't use this, here's the footage you can use, and that's it.
Yeah. We haven't gotten to the point where Star Wars movies are being edited by the marketing department yet. I'm looking.
Well, right, but it's an arm of.
I'm looking at you, Suicide Squad, which their entire first half of the movie was actually. Well, I think you were the one that brought this up, that the whole first half of Suicide Squad is actually edited by the people who make the trailers, which is why it feels like an hour-long trailer. Maybe you brought it up. Maybe I brought it up. I don't know. It's months. That's months old.
Yeah. Sounds like something you would bring up because I didn't see the movie.
Okay.
But right. But it's still, even if it is, it might be the same editors, but, if there's a different purpose in mind, it's to sell the movie, right? And I feel like I maybe think it was a little more successful than you did. Maybe not even because it's supposed to sell the movie, but at least get people talking about this movie, right? And I think, the line at the beginning, the breathe, just breathe, and then that line at the end about the Jedi have to end, right? Those are eminently quotable. Like, people are going to be quoting those on Twitter and on social media and whatever for the next 8 months at least, right? If not even after the movie comes out. So, dropping those in there, I think was really smart. So what did we see in the trailer, right? The trailer basically focused on Rey and her training, things she's learning along the way, her conversation with Luke. And that's, I think that was probably the right way to do it. Not, obviously, I don't know anything about what the movie itself is going to look like, but, it did, at the same time, it did feel like, okay, well, there was like a split second shot of Finn, there was a split second shot of Kylo Ren, there's a split second shot of Phasma. There was maybe a second of, or a second and a half of screen time for Kylo Ren. Who's in much better shape than people thought he was. You notice that? Right. Yes. Yeah. I thought, my favorite part of the whole trailer was, those ships, whatever those, speeders or whatever, racing across the desert with the red smoke or the red dust or whatever is underneath. I just thought that looked so good, that the color of that red against kind of the white, the white ground, and those ships looked really interesting, and you can kind of get not really close because it's not a close-up shot, but you can get a better view on StarWars.com. They have rotating banners for the top of their website, and if you refresh it enough times, or at least the last couple times I visited the site, that's been the banner. So you can kind of get a better sense of what these things actually look like. And
oh yeah, I'm looking.
You know
at
what
right
I one of the things that I actually liked about them. I mean, they remind me of two things. One, they remind me of the the speeders, the pod racers from episode 1 a little bit, at least in terms of kind of how they move and how those two pieces of it move in tandem with one another. But then also, the cloud cars, they're called from Cloud City,
right?
The little like traffic control modules where you have kind of the two different pods. So I like that. I like allusions to that. You get a little bit of kind of an A-wing looking fin in the back. So I just thought those look really cool, and I'd be interested to see them more up close in photo form or video form or whatever. The rest of it was, and I do agree with you in the sense that with the Force Awakens, right? We hadn't had a Star Wars movie in decades. This was kind of a completely new story, or at least a start over at a later point in time. We didn't really know what to expect. We didn't know what the look of it was going to be like. We didn't really know, who these characters were until we had seen the movie. Whereas, this being the sequel to that, we kind of know, right? We kind of expect like, oh, I want to, we'll throw, the shot of John Boyega in the, medical pod just because people are going to expect to see him now, right? Whereas with The Force Awakens, no one really had expectations of seeing particular characters or seeing, I want to see Poe Dameron in action or whatever.
Yeah.
So, it's a little different now where they have these characters who are established. I mean, I do think you saw a shot of Carrie Fisher from the back, right when breathe, what do you see? And then she says the light, and then you kind of get a shot of Leia in the back with just a very brief snippet of Leia's theme, and then the dark, and you get what looks like a crushed. I think was that Kylo Ren's
some people have speculated that it's his mask is crushed.
I think that was his mask from The Force Awakens.
The bezel or whatever on his the chrome. Yeah, I've had
right.
trouble with that myself.
Right, but so I think that was to say, we get Luke obviously because he's going to be a big part of Rey's training, but I also think it was still very much focused on Rey and her training and whatever that mysterious book was, that little bookshelf thing that was illuminated, or I couldn't quite tell what that was actually.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have speculated it's a very they're the Journal of the Wills. I think that's what what the speculation is, because they're getting into this. The Bendu and the Rogue One had the Temple of the Will. So I think they're kind of, at least every indicator is that's where the direction they're moving this, especially with they show that symbol, which I think has been
compass kind of looking thing.
Yeah, it's like a compass rose, I guess. Would that be similar to that? That they use in some of the Clone Wars stuff and in the toys, and some of the marketing has always been like that's the symbol of the Jedi, which I don't think has ever been used in a film though. But yeah, I think that's what it is.
Anyway, all that was to say, I think, and again, the trailer is not the same thing as the movie, but I think this is. You kind of see, okay, they're transitioning to, this is the core cast, the core people that we care about, the core people who are driving the story are Rey and Kylo Ren and Finn and Poe, right? And yeah, Luke is there as kind of a mentor, but the focus really is on Rey and her journey and, her spot on the hero's journey, all that kind of stuff. So the only other thing I would note, is just the way it began, right? Which I think was pretty. It was clever to begin the trailer this way, and I don't know if this is a shot that is going to be in the movie, but in some ways it was kind of the reverse of John Boyega in the stormtrooper uniform
Right.
popping his head up. Right, he popped his head up into frame, where this was like a shot of the ground or the rock, and then suddenly, Rey comes down into frame with her hand, and she's gasping. They're both gasping for breath and all that kind of stuff. So I thought that was kind of an effective mirror of that shot from the Force Awakens trailers.
Yeah, definitely, especially since it looks like, I'll concede there's some good imagery here. My complaints are about the whole approach, but that shot was kind of a, first it's like that. I honestly thought I was looking at a distant star field, and then as the aperture of the camera opens, and it's obviously a rock, and her hand slams on it, and then I look, and it looks like she's actually has just left one of these dwellings on Octo, one of these like things, which makes me immediately go, oh, is this her experiencing another vision similar to Luke on the tree in Dagobah or something? But that's obviously just speculation on my point. But yeah, no, it is kind of again, it's that kind of, the weird thing is that in some ways it's not disorientating where it's like a brand new character. You know what I mean? It's like it's that thing where JJ kind of pushed forward, like, oh, the first thing you're gonna see is somebody you've never seen before. Which, I mean, I guess that's the thing. It's like his whole approach is the mystery box, and maybe the mystery box isn't necessarily how Lucasfilm wants to go forward with these, and more of it's like this implication that, oh, your hero's in peril at this moment. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like,
right.
Finn was exasperated, at least when we were trying to contextualize. Like because they did something very sneaky when they did The Force Awakens, where they added a very, very faint sound of the trilling of a probe droid. And you're like, oh, is he like exasperated because he's going to have to fight a probe droid or something? Instead we find out he just because he woke up and he'd been on the ground. But yeah, it is kind of a cool analog, but I guess it ends up with a different end result. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing where it's like, well, what's going on here? That kind of, I don't know. Maybe it's not what's going on here. Maybe it's, I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I also concede that I really think I should have found a way to have seen. I know it's not in theaters or anything like that yet, but I think it might have been way better experience having seen it on the big screen. I don't know. I mean, I assume. Did you watch the panel live or anything like that, or just
no?
So I watched it live. To frame my experience a little bit, I was like, I've been having like a really bad insomnia lately, so it's like I went to bed, and I was actually out of town when this thing, and so I got up, and I was already like 25 minutes late. I missed the first 25 minutes of the panel, and I was like, I specifically set an alarm, so I get up, and I'm watching this whole thing on an old CRT television, like one of the old style TVs. So the resolution is terrible. So I finally like had to sit down last night and watch it on my laptop, in full high definition. And it's like, I did like it better then, but yeah, it was kind of like, I would say that, I kind of was watching the panel, and I jumped in, and they'd already introduced everyone, and they were just finishing up talking to Kelly Marie Tran. And I was just like, and they were talking about how cute she was and all this stuff. And I'm just like, okay, well, I think I've missed like the context of all of this. So I'm like, am I going to be completely, at a loss when the trailer is up? And I was kind of felt like I should, later on I watched the full panel and realized, no, there wasn't really any more information put forward.
No, we were told that her character's name is Rose, that she's basically like a mechanic or some kind of technician for the Resistance, and that she gets pulled into the adventures alongside Finn.
Yeah, so
that's,
she's
I think,
a
the
lot
extent
like
of
kind of a Bodhi Rook kind of character. The nuts and bolts of the Star Wars universe. But I will notice one thing at the end, which kind of immediately, now I'm starting to get to this weird place where I almost take like a dim view of the trailers, and I can't help but think about all the sleight of hand that was done with Rogue One. You know what I mean? That, like the fact that like in retrospect, it's like that's not the movie that I saw the trailer for. So I'm immediately skeptical when they show any of this now, because I'm thinking like I feel like I'm being played with a little bit. And even something Mark Hamill said as he was walking off, he goes, "Oh, we got this because I just recorded stuff for this last week and I haven't even seen it." And I'm like, wait a second. So like he's not, again, it's stuff he's saying for the trailer that's not going to be in the movie. You know what I mean? And it looked like it was like was it the breathe stuff? Was it the only truth I know? Is it the Jedi have to end, or was it all of it? You know, it's that kind of, you know, he'll say like, well, you know, 90% of all Star Wars dialogue is ADR. So I don't know, was he doing ADR for other scenes and they just they used that scene or whatever, or is it another piece of sleight of hand from Lucasfilm, you know, trying to sell us one film and giving us another? It kind of like, I guess that's why I don't get as jazzed on these trailers now as I think, because it's like, well, how much of this is really what the movie is? You know, yeah, there's some great visuals, but you know, how much are they going to be like, oh, well, when you actually see the movie, that's, although I will still say every time I watch sometimes I will put on the Force Awakens teasers and trailers, they still affect me, you know. So it's that kind of thing where even if I know that like, okay, that shot's not in the movie, we're actually not going to find out anything about X, you know, thing. And I still, if I can like take a step back, it still is more effective. And I watched this trailer 3 or 4 times last night, just on, you know, headphones, so I get a good sound. So I'm not watching it on my mom's television that she needs to replace. Sorry, Mom. And it still didn't quite. I felt a little bit like, okay, it like I said, it raised the question. I should have seen this in the theater, but still, I don't know how effective it is. I don't know if I've heard anybody say. I've talked to somebody, a friend of the show, privately, and he had, you know, he didn't have time to like, you know, go into his reasoning, but he kind of agreed with me. He had been underwhelmed by it. So.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It was sort of like, all right, this looks neat. You know, the look of it is interesting, and you know that shot of it's kind of Rey lying down and her hands on the ground, and you see little, you know, tiny little stones kind of floating up. You know, it is a reminder of, oh yeah, the technology really has changed,
right?
Since you know, Empire Strikes Back, when they had, you know, Luke lift a rock. You know, it's like, oh yeah, this is, they can make this look. I mean, it'll look both really good and like really cool, but then also it'll look like a lot of other movies, right? Like I'm sure they took. I mean, even Rogue One, I think, and I don't know if this was developed concurrently with Doctor Strange, but you know, the idea of the planet of Jeddah getting shot by the Death Star and kind of the ground rolling up on itself and all of that. I mean, that was, you know, not all that different from, you know, the way the cities were, you know, kind of kaleidoscoped around in Doctor Strange. So yeah, it's sort of like, yeah, this isn't, on the one hand, this looks really cool. On the other hand, like, I don't necessarily know if this is something that I wouldn't be able to see in another movie, you know? And so it's kind of a weird situation for Star Wars to be in right now, because for a while they're like, you know, I've never seen anything like this before, you know, in a Star Wars movie. And now it's like, yeah, that's really cool that they were able to take this thing that they, you know, were working on for the, you know, the 5th or whatever, you know, Pirates of the Caribbean movie and put it into Star Wars. It's like, well, and I mean, we've spent a lot of time talking about ILM and their legacy and all that, so we've gone over all this, but it's different now. And so, yeah, this kind of, okay, well, yeah, this 2-minute teaser looked interesting. I'm going to wait and see what the rest of the trailers look like, what, you know, the actual movie looks like, and see. That's what I mentioned earlier, right? Like, who knows if some of this stuff is even in the movie, because I mean, even with The Force Awakens, right? Like, it was, yeah, a lot of that was in the movie, but it was all in the first act of the movie, right? And so by the time we get to minute 12 of The Last Jedi, we may have already seen everything that was in all the trailers, and so there's this whole rest of the movie to show us. And so
I mean, it's definitely
we'll see how the rest of it goes.
It's definitely a teaser, but was it the first? Well, yeah, it was in the teaser. Is it when we saw the shot of Poe Dameron skimming over the water? Did we see? Yeah, Poe Dameron was in the teaser, so it's like, it makes me go like, hey man, where's Benicio? Where's Laura Dern? Where's Kelly Marie Tran? It's like, let's give
where's Snoke? Where's Hux?
Where's Snoke? Where's Hux? Let's get a little shot of this and that. And I mean, again, maybe I'm asking a lot from a teaser, and they want to save something for the trailer. Or again, Rian Johnson is constantly, fighting Lucasfilm, being like, let's show less. Show less. I know that I'm being inconsistent, because it's like that thing where it's like, yeah, I'm okay with this. And then I'm like, when they show less, then I go, where is everything? But, I think that's the problem. I think that's the thing that makes me go, yeah, I have complaints, but I can't necessarily indict Lucasfilm for doing it this way, because it's almost impossible to please. And it is kind of funny. It's like, Star Wars, after this big kind of, conclave of Star Wars fans, it was, for good or bad or whatever, it's still kind of strange, where it's like, okay, people think that Star Wars is the biggest thing ever. Well, guess what? This weekend, the 8th Fast and Furious movie just completely, beat their record for ticket sales. So it's kind of like, as much as we love Star Wars, it's operating in a world where, there's other franchises that are still active that could completely, steal their thunder a little bit, even during their weekend when they release a trailer. Although I don't really think the two are connected or even in competition with each other, but it does kind of show, there are other movie series that could quickly kind of take their place as being these big, important, like, Guardians of the Galaxy. I think that even comes out this weekend. Everybody's super excited about that. And, they're really pushing the new Alien movie. So it's like kind of thing where it's like, they don't operate in a vacuum. So they do, in some ways, either they have to go big at some point because they have another, 4 movies or whatever they're going to try to put out. Am I right? 4? Yeah. Two episodes and 2 standalones, until they open up the floodgates in a million Star Wars movies, Star Wars Babies and Star Wars on a desert island and Star Wars in space. Like, wait a second. That's a double negative. But no, I mean, I don't know. From a marketing standpoint, it was kind of an interesting thing. It's like, it didn't break any records. I mean, I didn't hear anything about like, that teaser broke YouTube records or anything like that would make me think, Star Wars isn't having to maybe still fight for a little bit of space I mean, like I said, it's a time-honored problem with genre movies and series movies, that every subsequent sequel kind of, the consumer or the viewer is less interested in. It's just a nature of the beast. So how to kind of fight that atrophy, like viewer atrophy or whatever, I don't even know how you do it. So
yeah,
they have like I said, they have an unenviable task.
Well, and especially, this trailer, this teaser is certainly out there, and it got some play on social media and all that, but I don't think it's going to be running on TV. And so the people who are actually paying attention to it is still, the scope of those people, the amount of those people actually paying attention to this teaser is much lower than, the potential audience come November, when you really start seeing more trailers to really try to drive attendance to the next movie. So, this one is still in some ways, for the diehards, just because that's the nature of, what people are paying attention to right now. And when people go to the theaters, the trailers they see before whatever they're watching, it's still, I'm guessing at this point, but Transformers and what's the one I just said, Pirates of the Caribbean, all of those things, and not right, exactly, and not yet anyway.
Yeah, like I said, it's a hard, and I think that might be indicative of why they're kind of why there's not going to be a Celebration 18. Like I think maybe that they're going to be like, hey, maybe we need to slow our roll a little bit. Maybe we need to, do a little bit more like.
Right.
Well, I mean, instead of having an event where it's like you have to go and this big thing and it's all Star Wars all the time for 4 days. Maybe for like when they're doing Han Solo, they're gonna probably keep it to like Comic-Cons and things like that, so they can go directly, to reach. Because I mean, like the numbered films, I mean, come on, it's a slam dunk. People are gonna go see them. It's at least gonna be, the number one picture of the first 2 weeks. But like Han Solo, again, even though I could make an argument that some of the things I've seen and heard about The Last Jedi actually make me feel that in some ways it's less of a known quantity than even the Han Solo movie. I'm not going to go to the point and say like I've got grave concerns, but did you happen to see the Nightline clip that I tweeted out a couple days ago?
No.
So just to give you the short.
This was a busy weekend for me.
Yeah, of course. It was what it was is, and people can go look on I retweeted it or tweeted it, and basically I think it was 2020 that they had done interviews either pre or post Celebration with Mark Hamill and Daisy Ridley, and it was kind of interesting. Basically, Mark said he was reading the script and he said quite candidly that he had fundamental problems with what Rian Johnson had decided to do with his character. And even Daisy Ridley kind of said, I was reading this thing and I said, I have to talk with you, Ryan. I'm not happy. Which I'm paraphrasing the happy. Please don't quote me directly. Go watch the video yourself. But I'm trying to get the gist here.
So here it is, right? So this is ABC News Nightline. Right? Mark Hamill said, it was shocking to me to read like what he had done with my character.
And that's like, I'm not going to say that Mark Hamill is the expert on Luke Skywalker. I mean, I think Mark Hamill is the expert on being Mark Hamill, and being Luke Skywalker is one aspect of that.
And creating these characters is a collaboration between the actor and the writer and the director, and so his portrayal of Luke Skywalker but to that point, right, his portrayal of Luke Skywalker previously was kind of a negotiation, or kind of his determination of that character in combination to whatever minimal feedback he got from George Lucas, right? Whereas now you have like a whole different person coming in who was not part of the original project and may or may not see, or care about what George's original intention for the character was, and just be coming at it from a completely different perspective. So yeah, I could see how that could be shocking.
Yeah, and I think that's
be like suddenly confronted with that.
And he did add the caveat that he had reservations even as far back as The Force Awakens, and that he ultimately feels that he was wrong. But the funny thing is that it's like I wouldn't necessarily say Mark was wrong, because I felt as a lifelong Star Wars fan, and I would actually consider Mark Hamill a lifelong Star Wars fan. I think he can kind of enjoy now that he's back in the mix. I think that he's got strong opinions about his character, and even though he's not necessarily the first person consulted, but he said things like, I thought that when my lightsaber was sticking out of the snow on Starkiller Base, that when it started to move, it would fly into my hand and I would be there, and And it's like, that's exactly what I thought too. And it was kind of like, I think he's still feeling a little bit, what's even the word? Annoyed maybe about the kind of the tease about Luke Skywalker in The Force Awakens. And I would actually say, 2 years down the thing, as much as that was such an iconic shot, there is a certain kind of disappointment in that 30 years and you get less than 30 seconds of your hero. And so
there's a broader kind of story and structural issue he pointed to as well that I read, because he was part of, like, he had his own panel, like Mark Hamill was all over
he was
Celebration, so he's talked about a lot of things in addition to this Nightline thing, right? But talking about the Force Awakens and how the two good guys, I guess, well, the three who witness Han Solo's death are Chewbacca and then two people who just met him, right? Like, so what kind of emotional impact, obviously, I mean, basically they had Chewbacca carry pretty much all of that emotional weight in the scene and at the end of the movie, right? And so he was saying, if Leia hadn't been able to find me, but she called out to me in the Force, and then I show up and we get there at the last minute, so we're there witnessing what happens, it would have been a bigger emotional moment. And that is, he's probably, I can't imagine he's the only one to voice that, and certainly all the business about, well, why does Leia hug Rey instead of Chewie when they show up, right? That's it's related to that. But yeah, I mean, he clearly had some, he is a creative / interpretive artist as an actor, and he has certain creative choices that he might make or that he might think make sense to him, and whether those are the creative choices that the writer and the director make may or may not be the case.
Yeah, and I mean, also the joke that he kept making last weekend was that I'm literally on the edge of a cliff. It's like, kind of like the, in some ways he was given what's his face? Oh God, he's gone a year.
J.J. Abrams.
J.J. and I'm blanking on whose name.
Kasdan.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they talked about this brain trust that we had of, like, the original Star Wars writer and a man whose Star Wars was the reason that he became a filmmaker, and the best they could come up with is a literal cliffhanger with a man standing on a cliff, and it's like it's a clunky visual metaphor in retrospect, and it's like again, it's like what deficit did this overall trilogy is going to have, because J.J. Abrams wanted to play with expectations, and I guess, I mean, the thing is, like, all this talk about, Mark and Daisy having these kind of like problems with the take on the characters, and Oscar Isaac saying, like, and I think even what's her name, Laura Dern, said, it's like being on an indie film. It's like it started raising a lot of these concerns that there's going to be like this very strange tonal shift, and even the teaser not necessarily feeling Star Wars enough for me, which I don't, even saying that, I don't know why I keep saying that, because a lot of the earmarks are there. I just don't know why the end result didn't resonate with me.
Yeah,
the way it should.
And what's interesting about this conversation too, and I think this might have come out today, so I don't know if you've seen it, but Ryan Johnson at one point was talking about Carrie Fisher and her contributions, and he said the first way that I connected with her was as a writer, and how he would go over to her place and they would spend hours and hours going over the script and going back and forth, and then ultimately they come up with a forward, they change a line, and and all that kind of stuff. But so it sounds like, to the extent that the headlines are like, oh, she helped write the movie. I mean, it sounds like it was mostly occasional script conferences, but how much of her consultation was structural stuff, how much of it was specific to her character, how much of it was her working on scenes, the training scenes with Luke and Rey, or again, whether it was just her stuff or whether it was kind of bigger scenes that other people were involved in and just were there to make the movie flow better. He didn't specify any of that, and so it's not, I don't think it's the case that she was a script doctor on this the way that she may have been for the prequels, but I mean, it sounds like she was consulted to a great degree on how to work out some of these script issues and how to make sure that this scene, this interaction between these characters fit, what the script needed to a much, much greater degree than, Hamill or Daisy Ridley or, Oscar Isaac or Laura Dern or whoever. And I can't decide whether I think that's fair or not, right? Because on the one hand, you could say it's not fair because, if he's going to put in the multiple hours to meet with this one cast member going over the script, why wouldn't he extend that to everyone? And then, how far down the line do you go before you stop doing that? On the other hand, right, she is more of a writer,
right,
than an actress, honestly, and she's certainly more of a writer than the other cast members. And so, if he was going to her on that level, it might have been the same as if George Lucas spent a couple hours talking to Brian De Palma about like, well, I don't know what to do with this scene, and Brian De Palma just laughs at him or whatever. Maybe Brian De Palma, maybe that's not the best example of a working relationship like that, right? But I mean, who knows how much working on The Force Awakens, Lawrence Kasdan turned to his son John and was like, "Hey John, I'm working on this scene, and any advice you have would be great. Let's give me a hand here."
Yeah.
Who knows to the extent to which that happened. And it would be on that level, it would be something like that, which no one would have a problem with, but since she was also a member of the cast and there are these other cast members who were like, yeah, the script kind of worried me. It kind of raises those questions.
Well, especially going back to The Force Awakens, the fact is, I think it's well known that Harrison Ford pretty much has a lot of say about whatever comes out of his mouth in a movie. Maybe it's not so much anymore because I feel like he's been working a lot more than he's been doing movies I wouldn't necessarily. Well, I mean, it's like that thing. There was that kind of like thing where he would try to he would be in some movie and it was a big deal. Harrison Ford has a new movie come out, and then at some point it became him and Josh Hartnett as a cop, or him and him as a the quality of the movies that he was in kind of dropped off, and that whole idea that people talk how Harrison Ford is, he had script approval, he had casting approval, say something which would be kind of like the zenith of his, action dad movies is like when he's a middle-aged older guy in his 50s being in the Air Force One, which is a pretty terrible movie. But it's like, he would talk about like, well, I called Glenn Close and asked her if she would be my vice president, and all this kind of idea that he's involved in the creativity of it. Well, I can't imagine he'd come back to Star Wars and not have a take on that. But who knows?
Well, and even at least with The Empire Strikes Back has more of these kinds of stories than the other two. But that whole "I love you, I know" exchange, he basically wrote that scene. He was there in conversation with the director Kirshner. But if you read both the the making of book, and then also Robert graciously sent me some books about kind of behind the scenes diaries of the movies as they were being made, of Empire Strikes Back and Jedi, and I'm working my way through the Empire Strikes Back one. And that's, someone, the publicist for the movie, but it's kind of his day-to-day interactions, and he's interviewing people. And then one day he had he got Irvin Kershner to agree to essentially be mic'd up while he was on set, just to get a sense of what he does every day. And so on that transcript, right, it's him, talking to Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford comes to him. He's like, "Oh, I want to talk about the script." And, they kind of work through that scene, and it eventually gets to the point where, Harrison Ford, comes up with this idea of like, well, if she says "I love you," I say "I know," and then it's like it's a moment and all that. The coda to that, or the little footnote to that is like immediately afterwards, Carrie or later on, Carrie Fisher shows up and she's like, "What the hell? You all are meeting about script changes for a scene I'm in, and you're not including me." Right. So sort of maybe a flip of what happened with this movie, but I don't know. And part of that may have been because George Lucas wasn't there on set, and Irvin Kershner was fine to change this stuff, whatever, as long as the core emotional note of the scene was there. Who cares? But I don't know the extent to which, I mean, even someone like Mark Hamill could have had those kinds of conversations with Rian Johnson, where he's like, so why am I doing this? Why don't we completely restructure this scene so that we're doing this other thing instead? I don't know that was going to happen necessarily here.
Yeah, I can't.
Probably for a variety of reasons, not just, Rian Johnson wrote it and directed it, but also that may not be how Mark Hamill works. Because I don't think there are any really comparable stories about Mark Hamill basically writing a scene that he's in any of the original trilogy movies. But maybe he preferred to do that stuff more behind the scenes or earlier in the process before they were like on set getting ready to shoot that scene. So yeah, I mean, it's this kind of thing where you hear these stories about, at least in Star Wars, the actors having a lot of kind of input on their characters, and now to get to this point where they're like, yeah, we had no idea what this was. Even with the prequels, right? I think some of those actors may have, I mean, they may have thought like, well, I don't know what crazy crap you're having me do here, right? Like, who knows what Ewan McGregor's private thoughts about the script were and how much he was able to kind of change individual scenes for himself, but. That's a little different because those are completely new characters, whereas this is, especially with Mark Hamill, right, a character that's been established for 40 years now, and now all of a sudden it's going in a completely different direction. Maybe not completely, but in a much different direction than what he expected.
Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting going forward. I think I have to prepare myself for thinking that maybe that things aren't gonna necessarily go the way I thought they were, and then I'm gonna have to be honest with myself if I like that. It's like that thing where like, oh, I like things when they're different. I want to push the thing, the needle forward or whatever, and then it's like, then you get it, and then you go, I don't know if I like this.
Yeah,
but I mean, I guess I think we've probably beat up on this trailer enough, so we probably need to move on. Well, at least I was beating up on it. Well, tangentially connected. They released did they call it a teaser poster, or is it just the poster?
I think it was just a poster.
So it's a image, and I think people have probably seen it now. It's Daisy Ridley or Ezra holding a lightsaber aloft at the bottom, bisecting the poster. On one side is grizzled Luke Skywalker, and the other side is
Kylo Ren,
right?
And so this is the blade of the lightsaber is blue, but the poster is essentially all in red. And so Luke's face is also like at least 50% larger than Kylo Ren's face. So it's, this kind of asymmetric thing, which they probably did because if they made it perfectly symmetric, it would look bizarre. But so it's a very simple poster. It's not cluttered with every single character that's in the movie, and maybe we'll get one of those, right? Maybe they did this because they haven't unveiled Laura Dern's character or Benicio del Toro's character yet, and so they want to introduce those characters in a different way other than just sticking them in the corner of a poster. But it is, especially compared to a lot of promotional material for Force Awakens, it is very kind of like not quite minimalist, but pared down and a lot sparser and a lot just a lot less cluttered, I guess.
So I mean, what's your assessment of it?
I mean I like it for many of those reasons that I just articulated. I like kind of the look and feel of it, broadly speaking. The specifics of Luke's face being huge and Kylo Ren's being not huge. That still looks a little weird to me. Certainly her stance is. The thing is too, like the glow of her lightsaber, and there's like a completely circular halo, and then you get, two beams of light going out to either side, left or right, which almost makes it look like Kylo Ren's lightsaber, but it's a very kind of like 1970s looking, Conan, or kind of some kind of like sword and sorcery movie from the 70s.
Yes.
Look to it, which I mean I think it's fine, right? It's an interest. I think it's an interesting aesthetic choice that they went in this. It's also interesting to me too that the edges, so the bottom, I don't know, bottom like 20% of the poster is just black, and then it says Star Wars Last Jedi, and so, but then the rest of the poster has this kind of border around it where the edges are rounded, and so again it has this more of maybe like a throwback look to it. Just the design and kind of the layout of it. Like I said, I like it generally. I still think that having Luke's face be so enormous is a little odd, but overall I like it. What do you think?
I would honestly say I love it. It's probably my favorite thing that they've done so far since Disney has taken over Star Wars to promote a film. I mean, poster wise.
Yeah.
I was never completely sold on any of the marketing posters for The Force Awakens. I felt like, the closest we got to the right thing is that Drew Struzan had done one. I think it was for Celebration or Comic-Con that wasn't widely disseminated, but it was this triumvirate. I think there was there was there was Finn, Daisy, and Han, maybe. I'm blanking on it. It might have been Kylo Ren, and it was very similar in scope to this. The only thing I would like better is if it had been more of a impressionistic painting. Like, honestly, I feel in some ways that we are looking at Photoshop manipulated stills.
Yeah.
I did see somebody had done they thought that they were like, oh, I fixed the poster, and they did they doubled Luke's face and then put him on both sides, and it was like, it looked horrible. So it's like that thing where it's like that. It's that same problem that they did with the promo for The Force Awakens, where it's like Han had a gun across his eye and Daisy had her staff across her eye, and they had to artificially elongate their faces. Again, I think the only picture that actually works in that marketing was the Leia where Carrie Fisher's face was kind of bisected by a bluish green light. And I think that out of that series of images, it was the only thing I actually liked, because it was like, I thought it was it just worked. And I think that this works too, because but the rounded edges is a very kind of like old school way of looking at it. I noticed some people in comment threads or whatever, when I was doing some research, that there was a question on, at least maybe it was on Twitter, that people had thought that for a while that Kylo Ren, that was Daisy Ridley, which I don't know where they got that from, but maybe they're looking at low res images or on their phone or something. I will say that I'm a little like the circular halo around the thing. Now that I'm looking at it on my computer, because of tones, it is a little too Captain America's shield. Maybe it's like a bullseye. They could have smoothed that out a little bit, but I don't. Like I said, I think that the art of the movie poster is kind of dead anyway. But this is that being said, I think this is, going back to the iconic, the uncluttered, the mysterious. It almost, in some ways, even though the placement of the of Rey and everything is very indicative. I think the Hildebrands, or whoever did the original, because there's a lot of takes on that original, like, Luke legs spread out with the lightsaber aloft high and kind of, seductively posed in front of him. I mean, you can't use that imagery isn't going to wash anymore, so we all know that has to be kind of tossed out. So I understand why, what are you going to have, John Boyega grabbing her leg or something? You know what I mean? It's like, you can't, or whatever, have like, Poe and each on each leg or something. Like, you can't really. I mean, that imagery is over with anyway, and so I wouldn't necessarily want to hold on to it either. But I think they got there in their own way. again, I wish it had been more. For some reason, I wish it was more of it had more obviously a painting or whatnot. I do like the unclutteredness of it. I'm honestly, I've already tried to find a good like 36 by 24 version, because the only one I've seen online are people selling the ones they got at Celebration, which are mini posters. Yeah. Again, I like the way that they have they're still not really giving away a lot, because I don't think posters should give away as much as trailers should. But we still don't know what exactly is going on with Kylo's right side of his face. I mean, my interpretation of the size differential is maybe, kind of tipping a little bit of information about this power relationship, that, maybe Luke is way more powerful than way more of a powerful influence. Although they didn't set anything up really in The Force Awakens to make you think that there was any kind of concept that Rey would be tempted by anything that Kylo Ren and Snoke had to offer. So I don't know if that's going to be an aspect. I mean, if they're kind of trying to mirror what happened in Empire, maybe they're going to at some point revisit this idea that Snoke and Kylo Ren want her for some reason, or to join, because I mean, I think that'll all be revealed in the movie, whether or not they're going to go with that. But yeah, I would say that as far as posters go, this is, since Disney's taken over, this would be my favorite. But
yeah, no, I think that's probably right. We've talked about the previous posters, and neither one of us was that enamored of them. I will say, I think I guess my last thought on this, I think it would be kind of neat, or I'd be curious to see if they made another poster where they kind of flipped it so that they had Kylo Ren in Rey's spot, right? And this is partially the shape of the lightsaber things that they made off, where I said, it kind of has the flares out to the left and right that make it look like his lightsaber, right? So if they put him in her spot with his, red jaggedy lightsaber, except then, the rest of the poster, instead of being a red tone, it's in blue. So you have his kind of red lightsaber against the blue, and then you put Rey's, half of Rey's face in the Kylo Ren spot here, right? Just to flip it and have, two versions of this poster, right? I feel like that could be interesting.
That actually is a really good idea, to be honest. That is actually a really good idea, because it would have been, it would have actually raised a.
It would have made them more money, right? Then you would have had people buying both.
Well, no, but I mean, I'm not being cynical. I mean, just the idea that like, The Last Jedi. I mean, I feel like people are kind of like have already kind of ruined this whole concept of The Last Jedi, because everybody's got to go, Ryan, is that singular? Is it plural? Oh, I found I found some marketing material from Portugal, and in, Portuguese, this means a singular. I mean, it's like, why do you do this to yourself? I mean, okay, when the marketing material comes out in the trailer, it's like, I'll pick on it for what it shows and doesn't show, but just the title, the kind of the links that people will go to, and maybe that's a level of fandom that I'm not showing proper respect to, but it's like, that's when I pull back. That's when it's like that thing where we talk constantly, like, where I make comments like, well, maybe we should go full spoilers for a movie and just see what that's like. But then we immediately, both you and I, eventually reject that thing where you get to the point where I think you're even less comfortable with spoilers than I am. But that kind of idea where, like, oh, it would have been beautiful if they had done two posters and, like, well, who is the Last Jedi? Maybe, they could play some lip service that, Kylo Ren, maybe he's the Last Jedi, or, I mean, that obviously he's not, but I mean, they just to kind of gussy up the mystery a little bit would have been interesting. It's like that kind of, Jedi, when Jedi came out, there was a lot of questioning in the when they talked, I remember, like, Starlog magazine, which would have been the place, the clearinghouse for Star Wars rumors 30 plus years ago, was, George had kind of even intimated, which, oh well, not everybody that's going to make it to the end of this journey, and how you think things are going to go are not necessarily. And I always found that, like, so basically, there was a shot, and that was under a tagline, under a picture of Vader and Luke in an elevator together. So they already kind of let people know, well, Luke and Vader are going to battle again, but obviously we knew that. But my point is that there was some question before we walked into that theater in '83 whether or not Luke was good or bad. Now, I know that people have said, like, interviews, even in that Nightline interview, there had been talk about, so the lady goes, so does Luke go to the dark side? Which is,
yeah,
was one of the speculations that had happened with The Force Awakens, and that was I think a lot of people with good, considerable Star Wars opinions thought that Kylo Ren mask was going to come off and it was going to be Luke, that something had happened or whatever, and I think that kind of stuff is, when they leave it obscure like that, it can be fun. You know what I mean? It's like, but then again, that's different than putting up lines or obscuring lines in trailers to confuse or whatever. I think it's like, to keep the mystery a little bit, and it's not Lucasfilm's fault that they went. The whole Last Jedi thing became not a controversy, but a point of questioning, and like people like I think the fandom's a little weird in the sense that they want everything kind of spelled out for them. And I'm not trying to pick on generations or anything, but if I could say one thing about, quote, millennials, whatever that means, is that movie wise, they tend to want to know what they're getting into when they go in. Whereas and I'm not, I don't know, maybe I'm not as, I'm like, I'd rather know less, but I feel like they kind of ruined that Last Jedi, because now Rian Johnson is specifically, addressing it as, Luke's the Last Jedi or whatever. And it's like, well, okay, well, you've completely deflated the fundamental question of your movie, where you could have ridden that all the way till December, but whatever. I mean, maybe this being obscure is that's just a technique that maybe it's been overused. At least that's my takeaway on it. But
yeah.
Again, I like the poster and wasn't as jazzed on the trailer, but that's a weird flip for me. I usually am loving in the trailer and hating the poster.
I know.
I'm in a weird spot.
It's a new era for Star Wars.
But, there is a lot more than just movies that was discussed at Celebration. Do we want to jump into Rebels, or do we want to talk? You want to do Rebels before any panel talk? Yeah, let's talk Rebels, because
let's talk Rebels. That's the other big. That's the other really big piece.
Well, yeah,
the
big takeaway is that kind of it's the last season, which is kind of like, oh, well, now I'm feeling a little bit torn, because I've complained about Rebels. But now I'm kind of sad to hear that it's going. It's at 4 seasons, which is, one season less than what its predecessor, and now, as time goes on, has become the defining work before Rebels. Clone Wars went 5 with a 6th season pieced together for Netflix. So it's ending. I don't think it's ending because of marketing or because of ratings. I think it's just ending because they want to. I guess they just want to end it at this point, or something else is cooking.
Yeah.
So
I'm kind of the same way, where I got a little wistful of like, I remember all of the shows we've done where we've sat there and said like, I like the idea of this Rebel show, but why are we getting this episode? Why are we getting that episode? Why do they show us a B-wing and then never go back to it? Or like, why are they focusing on this instead of that? And remember when Thrawn was here? It's been like 4 episodes since we've seen it, So I remember all those kind of episode by episode discontents, or just maybe notes for the story team that I know I certainly had, and you had as well. But hearing it would be the final episode is like, oh, that's too bad. I think I understand it, and actually, once I had time to reflect on it, or it sounds pretentious. Once I thought about it for a little bit, I thought, that's probably for the best.
Yeah, yeah.
For two reasons. One is that, it's better to go out on top, and better to kind of decide, this is where we're going in this story, rather than have, certainly Dave Filoni has the experience of having the network make that decision for you. And so you have, dozens of unproduced episodes in various states of being completed or incomplete. Right. And so you want to avoid that. And so if you're at all able to say, like, what, this is a nice natural natural end, or a natural point that we can kind of close the book on this chapter, let's do that, right? And I think the kind of indication that we got, certainly from the end of season 3, but also from this trailer that they put out there, is that the Star Wars Rebels is ultimately going to come down to being a story about Lothal, right? And the Rebels' attempts to kind of overthrow the Imperial presence on Lothal. And we start with the Rebels on Lothal meeting this kid, Ezra, and then it'll end with, kind of Ezra doing what he can to free his home planet, to free his people from Imperial, conquest or Imperial overlording. So I think that's a very natural kind of end to that story, and a natural arc to kind of the 4 seasons of that story. And so that makes sense to me. And then I think also too, again, this is a guess, but I would bet that the story team generally are kind of not entirely closing the book, but they've kind of mined this period immediately pre A New Hope, right? The few years prior to A New Hope, I feel like they've kind of figured out all of the stories they want to tell in that period at this moment, and have other things that they're going to move towards, right? Because again, the stuff we see is like 2-ish years behind what the story group is working on, right? They are already, working on projects that we're not going to see for several years. So, just based on what's happening with the books and the comics and everything else, I would bet that. So I should back up and say, we also know that this isn't the last project that Dave Filoni is going to work on, right? There was going to be another animated show, not just this. Not just the new like mini episode micro series of Forces of Destiny, but there's going to be another kind of full-fledged animated show. But my guess is that they want to do something set in a different time period. Now, whether that is, the period between episode 6 and 7, whether that is more of a, Old Republic story, wherever that is set. I mean, I think the story group generally may be moving towards, all right, you know what, we have told a lot of stories about what happened prior to A New Hope, with Rogue One, with Rebels, with various other books and things. Let's start investing our energy at a slightly different time point. And I think it was maybe during the journey to The Force Awakens, it's someone, I don't know if it was Pablo Hidalgo who said this. He's kind of the default because he gets interviewed more than anyone else, but it might have been one of the other members of the story group, or even someone else entirely, that gave the impression that at least at that point in time, they kind of knew they had right after the events of Return of the Jedi, and then right before the events of Episode 7, right? They had those mapped out pretty clearly. And then, however many, the 20 years, but 25 years between those two things was, less clear and had more room to develop new stories and for new ideas to come in. And so I would wonder if it was sort of the same with this is, okay, they knew they were making Rogue One. They had this Rebel show, so they spent a lot of time figuring out what the galaxy looked like at that point in time and how all of these things were starting to come together to form the Rebel Alliance. We got the formation of the Rebel Alliance at the very end of Rebel Season 3. Rebel Seasons 4 will be more of that leading into Rogue One, which then leads into A New Hope. They kind of run out of room to put new stuff in there, and so they're going to move on to a different period of time. That's my guess anyway.
Yeah,
and so in that, if that's the case, then wrapping it up after Season 4 makes complete sense to me.
And I think that's kind of what has been the takeaway from a lot of that. I think Dave Filoni had said that that the Rebels crew or whatever is not going to, they're not going to cover the Battle of Scarif on Rebels. So yeah, it's like that idea where eventually we're going to have to, we already know that, like, say, Chopper and Hera are still in existence, but we've got another, and again, the characters like, say, Sabine is going to be doing the Mandalorian thing, which I don't know if that's going to although it's like the teaser, the trailer kind of like dashed my hopes that she was going to kind of take the mantle of Mandalore. Now, just to quickly dip into that trailer, there's a woman with kind of reddish hair, kind of a bob. Do we know that who that woman is? I forget. Is she
her name is Bo-Katan Kryze.
Now is she from another episode?
She was a character from Clone Wars.
Oh, okay.
She
I got to rewatch that Mandalorian
somehow
stuff.
I mean, again, my Clone Wars knowledge was not huge, but I think she is somehow connected to she was the sister of the Duchess Satine, who was Obi-Wan's old flame.
I see.
Right? But she was the leader of the Night Owls, a lieutenant in Death Watch, the Mandalorian group. So she's from the Clone Wars show, and this is something Filoni talked about too at after Season 3 came out, right? Which is that it was not, and we I think covered this a little bit, but it was not his initial intention that so much of the Clone Wars would bleed into Rebels, but it has.
I think he's given up.
He saw this as kind of a nice way to wrap some of those stories up, which honestly, I mean, I think is fine when you consider, I mean, a lot of the other things they're doing. Certainly, I mean, this Thrawn book that's out, it's not as clear there, but there are remnants of it. Certainly Catalysts, the book Catalyst, this idea that in a lot of ways the rebellion or this fight against the Empire is really tied up in a lot of ways and in a lot of both to a large extent and in a variety of different ways, still tied up. There's still a legacy of the Clone Wars, right? You have these veteran clone troopers floating around. You have, what's his name? Galen Erso, his research, the fact that he was able to work on this Death Star project, was rooted in a lot of the work he did during the Clone Wars, developing energy sources and things, right? So the fact that the Clone Wars ended, but they have this kind of enduring legacy over the galaxy and certain portions of the galaxy, I think that makes perfect sense to me when it's presented in that way. So, what annoyed me was that he would claim that he wasn't just extending the Clone Wars, but then he kept bringing in, characters from the Clone Wars. But to tie it more explicitly into kind of the origins of this rebellion and who they're bringing in to help overthrow the Empire on certain planets, like that I get, and I think, right. So again, this is going to be maybe wrapping up some things that are happening in that era, and then moving on to a different period of time in this galaxy.
Yeah, I mean, my takeaway is that it's always been he kind of dropped all pretense that really Rebels is kind of a soft sequel to Clone Wars. I think I saw him basically at the panel kind of said that, or an interview around that time. And yeah, I think most of my kind of annoyance is the fact that I never have truly connected with that show. So it's like that idea that like I was like, do I really have to go back and watch that thing that I still don't quite enjoy as much as but yeah, I mean, it's now that it's back on Netflix, I'm like, again, it's like, I think I've been watching it wrong. It's like, I think I have to watch it like a season, whereas there's some question they do, it's much more dependent on arcs on the Clone Wars.
And you have like mini 3 or 4 episode arcs within a season. And then at least initially the first couple of seasons, like it wasn't told in chronological order necessarily. Like that part threw me off initially. So
yeah, so it's like that thing where it's like, well, maybe in this time off, I'm gonna revisit that on Netflix, and maybe at least on the Mandalorian arc, so I could get up on who these characters are. Maybe I'll get more out of it. Like again, it's like I said, every time I've tried to get into that show, I keep finding myself like, oh, I'm not watching TV. But I don't know. Maybe it's time for me to focus on it and I can get another aspect, because it is nice that somebody's trying to, connect all these things. They're actually going to an effort, because it could be very easily be kind of like, oh, Disney, we're going to make a Star Wars cartoon. And then it ends up being something not terribly dissimilar from Ewoks or droids, where it's very, small child centric, and they don't make any attempt to connect anything, and it's just standalone thing. So I mean, it is kind of a unique, at least as far as I'm not into anime, so I don't really know how the storytelling is in that, if they do many interconnected stories and over long periods of time. I think that I think he worked on that, The Last Airbender, which I think has a universe and it's all interconnected, and because they did subsequent sequels to that, and it's all connected. But like I said, I've never been into it, so I don't really know for sure. So it is a rare treat that someone's taking something like this as seriously. But I guess a lot of times it was like, oh, why do I have to have this guy from the Clone Wars in every episode, whatever his name is, Hondo Anaka or whatever? And it's like, oh, please. But there is that, I guess maybe it's also partly the kind of the way it's marketed. Like the Ahsoka Tano thing, which started out, he had this Ahsoka Lives ? Shirt. Dave Filoni did, and then I guess they showed the trailer, and they came back, and he never. I don't know if he pointed to it, because every version of the panel I've seen cuts off when they show the trailer, and then they don't come back.
Yeah,
that he's wearing a shirt with a exclamation mark. She lives.
He does a costume change.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I felt like, if I'm going to be critical, I didn't really 100% love how Maul went out on this show. So I don't know if I'm going to 100% love what they do with Ahsoka. And I felt like, they missed a real opportunity to add some gravitas to really just put a closure on that character. But again, I think they're gonna come back, and she's gonna be like a ghost or something, and that's gonna expand. And maybe it'll tip into, well, when is it? It doesn't come out till fall, so it means that probably all the Ahsoka stuff won't happen until the spring, because then they don't want to do anything to contradict. Obviously in the story group, they've already worked this all out. They know what the story of The Last Jedi is. So they're probably preparing scripts to deal with this Ahsoka thing, and it's going to maybe dovetail into any of these future revelations about the Force from The Last Jedi. And that way it's like they don't have to, again, like the Mon Mothma and the God, why do I keep blanking? Saw Gerrera stuff. Like that stuff didn't pop up until after the movie, after Rogue One came out. I think a lot of that stuff's not going to get dealt with. And I mean, that's cool, because I would hate for something to be tipped in the cartoon way before it was in a movie. But that
Right.
that again, it makes you kind of wonder. It's like, well, does that mean we're going to have half a season of kind of like one-offs, or like things like Iron Squadron, which is like one of my least favorite episodes of last season, where it's just going to be a lot of early on episodes that aren't going to have a lot of weight to them, and then they're going to do a rush to the kind of a rush to the end of at the end of the fourth season to kind of tie it all up.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder. It's like, pacing has never been... I don't know if this is a function of them having to pace against movies or other works. It just makes me wonder. It's like maybe they'd be a little bit better at kind of pacing out. Maybe they can resolve the Lothal stuff early on and the Thrawn stuff, and then they can kind of deal with the... the Force, the Jedi. What do you do with two Jedi in a fictional universe where Jedis aren't supposed to really exist? Are they going to do it definitively? Are they going to be coy about it and kind of have them go off and like, oh, we're going to explore the corporate sector and and then leave a place for them to pop up in whatever Filoni's got cooking for this new animated thing? Are we know for a fact that he's working on something animated?
Well, he's I believe he's the executive producer of this Forces of Destiny micro series. But I think, the reason he stepped back from being the supervising director on Rebels was to go into like broader animation development for Lucasfilm. And so I take that to mean that, he's their kind of head of the animation department, or, whatever liaison between the story group and whatever various animated projects they have in development.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask this is because I keep on thinking about, like, on some level, he has to want to want to make the jump into the live action, either through a live action TV series, or like, you can't imagine they still haven't announced that last standalone movie. Obviously,
it sounds like we're getting that this summer.
Okay, it makes me wonder. Is like, isn't it on some level? Isn't he probably wanting to make the jump to being like, hey man, I've done like 2 series for you, 3 and a mini series, and it's like I'm ready to. I'm like the last heir apparent of George Lucas. I'm being consulted when they make movies. I'm privy to the. Right. It's like, why, put me in, coach, that kind of thing. Or maybe he's the kind of guy who's like, I like to exist in the realm of television. That's my strength. That's what I want to do. And movies are for movie people. I don't know. I've never heard anybody like definitively ask him what his goals are inside Lucasfilm, and I honestly don't feel like in this stage in the game you're ever going to know until it happens or doesn't happen. So I mean, that's just my own speculation. You'd think that at some point, a lot of these, like Simon Kinberg, he was supposed to be developing that movie with Josh Trank, and then that got canceled or put on hold, and now he's developing a whole different movie, and you're like, right. It's like, when is it's that question, like, do they hire from within on these kind of situations?
Well, I remember it was a while ago, a woman announced basically that she was starting to work on an animated show for Lucasfilm, a new one, but I can't remember her name. We talked about it on the show. I can't remember her name, and I don't know whether it's this Forces of Destiny show or if it's a completely new one. Let me try to suss that out.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, the Forces of Destiny, they kind of announced this. They're like, I think they literally use the term bite size,
right?
Kind of
micro series,
and I think it kind of is like one of those things. Like, it's going to be it might be fun, and especially since they were able to kind of like, obviously, except for Carrie Fisher, they were able to get all the original actresses. I get the feeling it's a kind of a female-focused thing, even though
it is. It's a focus on the heroines of Star Wars.
Yeah, so it's going to be that kind of thing where you're going to get that level of, like, a production level. You're actually going to get the voice talent. The art style is a little I don't even know what the word would be. It's kind of almost like around the level of the Gendy Tartakovsky Clone Wars, the original Clone Wars series. So I don't, the cynical part of me thinks that this is kind of just a toy commercial because the toys almost came out before the trailers, where they've done the figures in a very exaggerated
proportions.
Yeah, proportion. It's like that.
Yeah.
Some people I almost kind of like said they kind of look like the Jerry Anderson style. Animatronics. Right. And I said, I was like, they're not, the figures are definitely, they're like, they're dolls and they're not action figures, but they have action. They got their weapons. They've got the thing. So it's kind of like, it remains to be seen if it's going to be good or not, or we're just looking at kind of them coming up with toy commercials.
Right. I mean, some of the writing about this series and these figures and everything was that it was sort of I don't know how explicitly, but it addresses at least the, where's Rey, #where's Rey problem, which was all about toys, right? I mean, that was about why can't we find any Rey figures in the stores? Where are all the women of Star Wars, represented? Why can't I buy any toys for my kids? So this addresses those issues by like, here's a whole line of toys of kind of the women of Star Wars, the heroines of Star Wars. And so, yeah, I mean, you're right. We did kind of find out about the toys concurrently but those were picked up sooner than the fact that it was going to be a series of animated shorts, right? It's not going to be a full-fledged TV series either. It's an animated micro series, and it's celebrating some of Star Wars' most beloved and inspirational characters. I mean, one of the things I find interesting about this too is that, I mean, everyone's kind of picked up that like, okay, this is the heroines of Star Wars. It's specifically, for the most part, the women. But none of the promotional material makes that explicit. And when Kathleen Kennedy in the promotional quotes they've used from Kathleen Kennedy, like she's just used the term like kids or heroes or whatever. She has not made it gender specific herself either, which I think, I mean, it's great that they're not making it gender specific, and I think it makes total sense for them not to make it gender specific. But I do, there's the kind of perception versus reality. And if this is perceived, how this is perceived and whether this gets picked up, by all kids or just, young girls, like that's, I guess, remains to be seen. But yeah, so when we've been talking about the Forces of Destiny, so I think I read that Filoni was the executive producer on that. But I would guess that they have another series coming down the pike, and maybe that's, again, maybe that takes place in the Resistance First Order. I mean, honestly, I've kept up with them. We haven't talked about them in the show, but I've kept up with the Poe Dameron comics. Honestly, they should have done an animated series. A Poe Dameron animated series would have, solved like all of the various issues with the comic, like the pacing issues. Like, yeah, if you stick it in a 22-minute animated episode, like you can get through some of these things more quickly, or you make sure that you have some dog fights in there, or that there's action in there. So whether we get something like that, or again, if we get something in the Republic era, who knows? But I do feel like there's at least another full-fledged animated series coming.
Yeah, I think that's actually a good observation about the Poe Dameron thing. I mean, that there's something about that screams a kind of maybe an 80s inspired, like a G.I. Joe Transformers thing, where you
focus on Black Squadron, you get to learn more about those characters.
A lot of action, low stakes, basically, because it's like that's the big problem with that's one of the problems with Rebels. And I don't know if it's really a problem, but there can be high stakes for characters, but low stakes for the overall goal, because it's like they're never going to all of a sudden defeat the Empire. It's that kind of, because they can't, but there's high stakes for the characters, but with something like the Poe Dameron thing, it's like, it is, when you read the comic, you go, well, that guy's in The Force Awakens, so I know he's safe. But if they did some kind of like thing where they're just kind of more emphasis towards action than for pushing forward their story, like every week they're fighting Terex, like he could have been more of like the Cobra Commander of the First Order.
Him and Phasma could have been.
Yeah. Oh, they could have given something for Phasma to do something, It's but whatever. These things are always, by the time we hear about them, they've been in development for 2 or 3 years anyway. So what are you going to do? It's it's not my favorite comic. And then when somebody and that's the thing about and again, going back to Celebration, I will say that one of I watched a lot of panels, but then I was kind of bummed that certain panels were not available. The things that I like to consume felt like it's like I had to go kind of through, illicit means, meaning YouTube people that would put up stuff that wasn't supposed to be there, probably has been taken down. Because John Knoll hosted a making of Rogue One panel that I would have loved to have watched. I can't find it. I can only find clips.
I feel like they streamed that stuff, those kinds of panels last year.
Yeah.
Because there was a Creatures of the Force Awakens panel. There was a Droids of the Force Awakens panel. There was just a general hey, here's some cool stuff ILM is doing. Where John Knoll, he was like, oh, I just decided to make, an updated version of the little wireframe model of the Death Star. No reason. And then it turns out that was in Rogue One,
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like
and those were streamed and they were put on YouTube afterwards. So I don't know why they didn't do that this year.
I mean, the truth is, I think, because I'm being negative, I want to say thank you to StarWars.com and even Verizon, which I'm not sponsored to say that, but I mean, I know their name was all over it, so they spent the money. But in the future, I think it would be I would pay $25 to have an app on my Apple TV or on YouTube or whatever, that for someone like me that does a Star Wars podcast that's not going to go to Celebration, because I'd pay a premium to watch everything, and I could pick and choose. And then instead, because my assessment of the coverage of it was I said to my wife, it's it was like watching QVC for 4 days, because occasionally there'd be great stuff and again, if you're a person who's I don't want to watch any of this, I would say, but I want to watch one thing, go find the cut down hour-long version of Mark Hamill's tribute to Carrie Fisher panel, which was just amazing. Because it was it was amazing because it was real in a way that I felt like nothing else that I saw this weekend. Obviously they're when they have panels for all the things that are coming up, they playing with the audience and stuff like that. But there is a certain veneer of promotion, which that's what Celebration really is. It's a convention. It's a trade show. You're paying money for a trade show, and that's a little cynical way of looking at it, but that's kind of how I feel. And no more that I feel like that than I did watching them, bring something out, and then nobody asks any interesting questions. It's just, oh yes, this is so cool. This is so cool. It's that was the word. If I had a clicker, and every time the word "this is so cool," which made me laugh so hard when Red Letter Media, I know you probably haven't been keeping up on, they've been Red Letter Media, which is a bunch of guys from Wisconsin that do they do these kind of comedic reviews of things, but they are real reviews, but they have a comedy sense to it that are great. They do a thing called the Nerd Crew, which, being a guy that with a Star Wars podcast, you have to have a sense of humor about yourself when you're and they kind of take Star Wars promo people, podcasters to task a little bit. And one of the catchphrases is that they just all start saying, "That's so cool. Very cool. Very cool. Very cool." Almost to the point where it loses all meaning. And that's, I would honestly say, if I'm going to be critical about, the coverage, is that we got a lot of people on that that main stage, and they would bring stuff out for a few minutes, and people would just say, "Isn't this cool?" And I felt like I was being, I'm not the demographic, I'm not gonna, I buy Black Series toys, books, and T-shirts. So that's kind of like my thing. So I mean, obviously, there's for people who like that, then it was a boon to them. But then there was like weird things where it's that kind of like the big Star Wars machine. And one of the big problems that I had with it, it was like, they had Daisy Ridley, not Daisy, what was Felicity Jones and Forrest Whitaker on, and they almost had nothing to ask them. It was like, it was kind of like this kind of thing where it's like, oh, well, that was 4 months ago. We're on to something else. They seem, and it was like kind of shocking that like you've got these actors, Oscar-winning, Oscar-nominated actors sitting there who've just been an incredibly successful Star Wars movie. That people generally, I haven't heard anybody say, and then they had nothing to ask them, and it was like this awkward 4-minute interview, and it was like, really, all the brain trust of all the StarWars.com people couldn't come up with a better way to integrate. And now I don't know what the schedule is like. Maybe it was a thing that they said, hey, we've got Forrest Whitaker and Felicity for 5 minutes, and they just threw them out there, and it was like they were scrambling to come up with stuff to say. I don't know the circumstances, but it was that weird feeling where it was like, it was everything going forward was important, and or selling product was more important. And that honestly felt in some ways how my take of the whole, 40th anniversary, which, I mean, the panel itself was kind of cool. It was nice that they were able to get, Harrison to come out and George to be there. Although George, in some ways felt a little bit, I mean, I don't know. He's always uncomfortable. He did say, it was one of the best quotes from the weekend is that, it's like my takeaway, or, I know that, I'm not supposed to say this, but Star Wars is for 12-year-olds, which is like, it's like, right. I'm so glad. So many people these days in fandom and stuff spend a lot of time trying to tell you what Star Wars is. And, and it's like, and I hope we don't do that, but we talk a lot and I have my opinions. I hope people know that they can toss them in the bin if they don't agree with them. But, in a world where people are constantly in fandom or telling other people what Star Wars is, it was kind of funny and refreshing to hear from the horse's mouth himself. It's for 12-year-olds. Right. And I think that's, that's a really simple way to kind of look at it, but that, I don't know, my takeaway of like, I was excited coming into this that it was going to be a lot of looking back at like where it all started that didn't happen. And I mean, I like Kathy Kennedy a lot. I think she's doing a fantastic job running Lucasfilm. I think that she has weathered the storms of losing cast members and criticisms and blah, blah, blah. Like, in a way that like it can't be, but I feel like in a lot of ways her job now is to kind of like protect issues of like fan expectation. Like she has to jump in. She has to like, Bob Iger says, he said that thing about Han Solo, which turned out to be kind of it was just a guy kind of out there in his $5,000 suit giving a presentation to people in $5,000 suits and like,
he like misremembered a summary that someone gave him. Yeah, it's like an outline. Yeah.
Yeah, and he says he gets his name, and then people are like, "What does that mean? Is this real? What is Han Solo's real name?" Like, I mean, I fell for it too. I was like, "Oh, we
were both like,
this is not making me happy." But then, even then, Mark, in his humility, was kind of when he was talking at the Last Jedi panel. He was saying things like, well, it's not really my story anymore, blah, blah, blah. And I was just kind of like, and I was getting kind of that sinking feeling where it's like, oh, is this going to be that if I would say that a number one problem with Star Wars as a whole in its storytelling is it tends to tease and huge things don't get paid off. And then people just kind of go like, oh, well, that, we just, things like midichlorians and force ghosts and chosen ones and, we could go the endless list. And then Kathy Kennedy, hearing that Mark is basically saying, she knows that people are going to say, I guess Luke's not a part of this really anymore. And her jumping in, it's like, and she had to do it explicitly. It was not another, Jen Wang thing where he lets a spoiler go in the middle of the thing and you could just see her. Oh gosh. And she didn't even know how to deal with that. I think even Alan Tudyk was like, can I get my hand in front of his mouth fast enough? And I understand. I mean, but I like that. Honestly, I like that because it's a real thing. And Mark, his insecurities or whatever, or maybe his axe to grind a little bit. I don't know. I don't know what the behind the scenes things. For all intents and purposes, he was Star Wars Celebration. Him and Warwick Davis. But him saying like, "Oh, I'm not," and her going, "I want to stop," and Kathy Kennedy says, "I want to stop," and let people know that he is so important to this film, and I don't know if that's corporate communication or that's 40 years of working with actors that Kathy Kennedy was like, I gotta squash this right away because it's going to be 4 months of people going like, why are you shunning your legacy characters or whatever? So she was very smart to kind of like nip that in the bud.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's true or not, who knows? I mean, she's got a
I mean, especially though, because then you had Rian Johnson previously like, oh, he should win an award. He should win an Oscar for this performance. Right. So that if that, I mean, and who knows if that's the line that Lucasfilm is going to be pushing, but certainly if they spent time talking up his performance and now he comes in and it's like, yeah, I'm not that important to the story anymore. They want to make sure that they have one consistent message through this.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's important because, as time goes on and when they kind of do these things and have to come out and promote the movie, the one consistent person, and I don't know if this is even something that she's excited about, is going to be Kathy Kennedy. She's the one that has going to have to come out with the microphone and kind of corral this because, I'll be honest, my takeaway of like the Last Jedi panel, I wasn't like particularly like enamored by Rian Johnson as a guy trying to tell you about his movie. That's not a dig on him as a person, but it just felt like he was trying to do his JJ thing. He was trying to do a JJ thing where, JJ seems to be like a super highly well-adjusted nerd. You know what I mean? I don't ever question that guy spent a lot of time being a geek and a nerd or whatever. And, he put in his due diligence. And I don't have any question that Rian Johnson is probably that kind of guy too. I think the guy sings in a folk trio with his brothers. I mean, he's a nerd. It's not, not that you have to be a nerd to make Star Wars, but it helps. But he didn't quite give it was that kind of like, that panel felt so, oh God, what's the word? I had it written down in my notes and I kept using it. Perfunctory. There's something so perfunctory about the Last Jedi panel that maybe that, and again, I only watched half of it before I got to see the trailer and then flipped around and watched the first half. And so I don't know how much that really influenced my takeaway of the trailer, but and again, they don't want to let people, they don't want to give away too much, but there was that kind of idea where it's like, well, they can't really say a lot, but they're required to go out there and press the flesh and get people excited. But then again, it's like, well, okay, Daisy was there, Mark was there, Kelly Marie was there, but obviously Carrie couldn't be there, but it was like, where's John Boyega was there, but John Boyega had almost nothing he could say.
Right.
It was like no Oscar.
Right. What's the point of trotting these people out if they can't actually talk about the movie then?
Where's Gwendolyn Christie, or maybe she's making Game of Thrones. I mean, obviously maybe it was a scheduling issue and that's why these people couldn't be there. But, I guess it's just the optics of these kind of things where it almost felt like, oh, is this just a thing that they had to do? Well, let's just get the principles out there. Or, I guess Eunice is, I don't know if he's playing Chewbacca in this. I mean, they've still left it.
I believe so.
But I mean, I guess since maybe they didn't want him necessarily when they're having Peter Mayhew out there at the 40th panel, which was kind of like I think there was some kind of, I'd heard some kind of, Peter had seemed a little annoyed, but I'm jumping around a little bit, but, a lot of that kind of the 40th anniversary, to be perfectly honest, felt a little perfunctory. It was I was very excited about this idea that, 40 years of Star Wars. And it was great that Hayden Christensen showed up, but it's like, where was the Hayden Christensen panel? Where was the, where was I guess there was a panel of Rebel pilots that didn't, it was Garrick Hagon and Angus McInnes and Dennis Lawson, who's never done anything Star Wars related since that audiobook that I talked to about 8 episodes ago. I didn't get to see any of that. Why weren't those people brought up? Why didn't they do some kind of hey, let's do a cast photo. Let's get all the living, people left from the original trilogy that come for a group photo or something. It's 40 years. This is important. This is an important thing. And I felt like they were kind of well, what's the, let's just bring out the big heads. Where are the people that help make that? Where's Gary Kurtz? Where's Willard and Gloria Hayek that helped form that script? Even having, maybe some of these people's lives are busier than I think they are, and they're not necessarily, it was kind of weird where it's you've got Harrison was great. Mark's great. They're always great. They're a known quantity. But then Billy D's sitting up there, and it's he didn't seem to even want to be there. And that might be with the revelation that he let it out during his, his panel, which again was depressing. It was kind of I don't know if he's over it or he's just getting to an age where he just doesn't care or he just can't care. But it was I really feel bad for people that waited in line for that, because he didn't seem to want to answer questions. He didn't seem to he let it slip pretty, I don't know if it was a slip, but he let it go that he's not in episode 8, which for me, and I'm sure for John, is kind of a bummer. I hope, I don't know if he's the kind of guy that can be coy enough where he's saying I'm not in it, but he really is.
And I'd kind of been guessing that he wasn't going to be in it just because we haven't heard anything for so long.
I'd heard rumors that
I understand why you can't put everyone in these movies, but it is a little disappointing.
He was a major part of the last 2 movies. It would have been nice, but then it's then I saw this clip where they say oh, they should leave Lando alone, and I thought, oh, well, maybe that's what he took. He was maybe he didn't want to tarnish it, because I mean he's not in the same shape. He didn't hit the gym like the other people did, and he's also 4 to 5 years older. I think he's 78, maybe 79 now. But really what the interview said was, I think he didn't like the fact that the character has been recast, even not that he wanted to play young Lando, but I think he's I'm Lando, I don't know what Donald Glover's doing, but I'm Lando. And I think that's a little bit of what it was. I think he doesn't, I think a lot of people like that narrative that, oh, he had lunch with, Donald Glover and they got along and he passed the torch or whatever. I don't think, he goes, so what did you guys talk about? He goes, I don't remember. We just talked about stuff. And it was I don't know if he's, like I said, I don't know if he's irritated or he's just old. It's that kind of thing where it kind of hurts a little bit to see that, but that's also part of life. I mean, we don't stay young for, it's you either get older or you get dead. So it's kind of, you have to accept that. But again, I was kind of hoping, I had heard rumors that Billy D had been in Dubrovnik but that obviously rumors, these things get thrown around, but my takeaway about the panel is like, I just wish that they had, even if it wasn't on the main stage, just that kind of concept of really doing a proper, 40th anniversary idea of really getting, and it felt a little bit like Disney wasn't terribly interested in spending a great amount of time looking backward. And
right.
I mean, even like, and the last thing I'll say is that one of the things that I saw had shown up kind of bootlegged on YouTube that I would have loved to have seen. Again, I would have paid you the $25 to have had access to the whole weekend, Disney, is that they were showing like original like outtakes from the pilots, like the stuff that they pilfered for Rogue One.
Oh, right.
And it's funny. It's like Angus McInnes dropping an F-bomb in the middle of the thing. And, and again, it's like, okay, maybe the stories would been a lot of like, well, we get up at 6 a.m., you drink a cup of coffee, you put your jumpsuit on, and then it's 8 hours of us being in a cockpit rocked back and forth while George reads lines to us. But, on some level, I want to hear those stories from the horse's mouth, why we still have these people. I would have loved to have heard, Hayden Christensen talk about his experiences, because he's kind of taken time off from acting and has a family now. He's obviously, let me tell you one of my takeaways from Hayden. I think he's in episode 8. I think he's in there in some way, shape. He looked like he hadn't aged a day. And to me, that only reason that a person looks like that is that he's been working out. He's been eating right.
Yeah.
He's been eating the good food and doing the good workouts and drinking water. It's not that thing where people go like, who is that? It's like, it's Hayden Christensen. It's like, no, you knew, he's got all of his hair and he looks like, he hasn't played that role in 12 years. And of course he doesn't look like he's 25, but he definitely still looks like it wouldn't be that thing where all of a sudden it's like, he doesn't look anything like him, but we're all supposed to pretend that that's what he always looked like. It's like, no, he's in shape, which makes me think either he's got really good genetics or he's been working, that's kind of,
I agree. It would be interesting. And I don't know to what extent Adam Driver would care about this or agree to do this, but in the future, having a panel with, because there's a photo that was floating around of Hayden Christensen and Mark Hamill, and Mark Hamill's like, oh, my father or whatever, my dad. Have Hayden Christensen, Mark Hamill, and Adam Driver as the Skywalker family panel. Like that would be kind of. I don't know if anything interesting would be said at it, like for all the reasons we've been saying, but it could, for the people there, it could be fun.
Yeah, I think that's just that kind of value added thing where it's like, and maybe that's a side byproduct of having, pretty hot young actors who are in a lot of movies and are critically acclaimed. Whereas, to be perfectly honest, the original trilogy and the prequels, usually the big name actors weren't, like your Liam Neesons or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They were at a stage in their career where it's like, by the time Revenge of the Sith came around, basically everybody was known for the fact that they were in Star Wars at that point in their career. Even Ewan, because Ewan's career had kind of like, all the early indie stuff had kind of gone way to now he was the Star Wars guy. So those people would have been more available. I don't know who shows up for those earlier celebrations. I guess it's like that, the panel and it would have been nice, but again, they're probably all working, but I don't know, maybe a audio video message or something just to get people hyped about like, hey, Oscar Isaac's is in Romania making some movie, he's just like, oh, I just want to let everybody know I'm really excited to come back. Even when it's kind of like that, it feels perfunctory, but I think it would have maybe hyped people a bit. Again, like I said, a lot of it tended to feel like I was watching an infomercial for whatever's new. It's like Anovos masks and whoever's making the Forces of Destiny figures and all the clothing and all this kind of it's like, that stuff all has its place. It's just I would have liked the option, and maybe the truth is I'd love to talk to some people that went, and I'm probably going to have a chance to talk to some people that went and just get a feel of maybe I, having watched the live streams, I got a fundamentally different experience. Maybe they had a I do know I did read Twitter that there was some real issues with people being able to get into things, which makes me really kind of glad I didn't spend the money to go, because like people had been waiting overnight, and then other people would just be able to jump ahead online. They'd show up at 6 a.m. and just be like, oh, because they only had one gate. They would let people in. They actually, whoever ran it had to issue an apology, and they had to reassess entry points for people, because people that had been waiting overnight to be at that Last Jedi panel ended up, again, that's why I would have liked to have like even video messages to give these people that waited overnight, I don't even know what that smell would have been like. Basically everybody eating Papa John's and being stuck together overnight. And then it turns out that like, oh, you wait in line overnight, you're still in the overflow room. And it's like, oh, well, that sucks. And I feel bad for people, because it costs a lot of money to do those things. And those kind of things are the exact reason why, an old fart like me looks at stuff like that and goes, I'm not doing it. I'll just watch it on YouTube. And again, you can make money. Again, Lucasfilm, $25. I'll give you $25 to watch it all on YouTube.
All access.
All access. Hey, I'm gonna up my initial offer to $30. $30.
Hey, there you go. So there's at least one more product for sale that I want to talk to you about, and that is Battlefront II. That was kind of the third trailer we got out of celebration for the I don't know if you call it a trailer or a teaser for Battlefront 2. We got a look at some of the locations, and there is going to be a single player. It looks like it's going to be actually someone who fights on the side of the Empire, which I'll talk about a little bit. But different locations, what looked like Hoth and maybe Endor, Starkiller Base. Maybe Scarif. It looked like you might have been able to see a little bit of the shield gate there. Online, people have found images that look like Camino, maybe Tatooine and Jakku. So a lot of different new maps. Like I said, the single player campaign. There was a reference, or there was a Maul versus Yoda lightsaber duel. Which was interesting. Rey and Kylo Ren were there. The Millennium Falcon was in it. The two things that interested me the most were there was a reference to Operation Cinder, which is the Emperor's, like, in the event of my death, like, you're going to go destroy these X number of planets. As sent, the message sent from those kind of red sentry droids with his face projected on them, and those first appeared in the Shattered Empire comic. And there's also this ship. It looks sort of like a smaller Star Destroyer, but with different wings and flaps. So it kind of looks like a cross between Maul's fighter from Episode 1 and then a Star Destroyer, a smaller Star Destroyer. So that was kind of an interesting design. I'm not going to play this game because I don't have any means by which to play it. But you're our video game person here. So what did you think of the trailer? Are you excited for it? Or was it sort of like the movie trailer where you're like, all right, well, we'll wait and see what the reviews are like. I'll see what more information we get. Or are you ready to go with this?
Well, everybody knows, and well, anybody who listens to this show with any regularity has been subjected to my constant bitching about Battlefront.
Well, that's why I want to get your take on this.
So, but that being said, I about half an hour before I started recording the show, I pre-ordered Battlefront 2, mainly because I got all these caveats, and I don't want to give them a free ad, but there's a certain retailer that initials start with B and B that they're having something. If you got to go to the website and look into it, you can actually, like, if you pre-order it through them, you can actually get like a $10 coupon that you can use in store or whatever. You got to sign up for one of their loyalty program. So that was kind of like, I get it's like, well, at first I was like, well, no matter if it doesn't matter the discount. If If it doesn't look like a good game, I'm not going to do it. But it looks like they may have, knock on wood, learned from some of their mistakes, and that they are giving us more of a, the game itself had that arcade feel, and I feel like the idea that they're like, hey, this isn't like a Star Wars simulator, you know what I mean? This is more of kind of like, let's take all the fun ships, weapons, creatures, droids, troopers, heroes, villains, and throw them into kind of a big sandbox, and let's have fun. And I think that they're gonna, single player aside, which looks very, I think that's gonna be really interesting. I think it ties into what's that book, Inferno Squadron? I guess that's going to be the tie-in. I think we've already discussed that. So yeah, I like the idea that you're doing it from the Imperial side. It'll be interesting. I don't know how much of a story it's going to have. I know that the first Battlefront back for when it was on Xbox didn't really have a thread through story, and then the second one did, and it was called through like a Clone Troopers. And I think that overall that worked a lot better. And I think that, I don't think that it had the original Battlefront, at least this version of Battlefront, had graphic issues or anything like that. So I think it looked good. So I think they've got that down. If they can just get the play more fun, I think that, one of the other big problems from an economic standpoint, at least for me personally, is like, you spend $60 for a game, and then you have to spend another $50 for the second half of the game, aka DLC. That really burned, because it's like you end up like, that's $110 I've spent on this game, and I was ultimately unsatisfied. I think EA claims that they're not going to do a paid DLC this time around, so when they release a new map, it's just going to be included with it, and they're going to probably maybe move to the microtransaction things, which means if you want a certain gun and you don't want to have to go through all this thing to get it, or you want to have a mode, whatever they call them, your armor and aesthetic things with your trooper, then that's where they make their extra money. So it's not going to be one of those things where you're going to play it, hopefully not play it for 2 months, and then find out, if you aren't going to spend money on the DLC season pass, you're going to end up, you've only got like maybe 5 maps to play, and everyone else is playing on the new map, and you're running around with half-filled maps. So I think they may have kind of cracked the code on that. I think there's a different group working on it, because it's not the same. I don't know if it's DICE though. That's the problem. Because DICE is a Swedish group. Well, anyway, there was a woman that had. So
the game director works, or EA Motive.
Okay,
but I don't know to what extent. I mean, I don't know enough about the video game industry to know if they replaced DICE, or if that is just like the name for the overarching company, and then they would contract to DICE anyway. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has a lot to do with, once they kind of use they're still using the engine, the brains behind is this Frostbite engine, which has been used, which I think was developed by DICE, the Swedish company. And so it's like, once they've kind of, it's Criterion Games with Jade Raymond's Motive Studios is working on it. So I think once you kind of like set the pieces, it's not like starting from scratch when you have a new game, because they're like, well, it already looks good. You can just improve, as games go, as generations of video games go on, then they get better about utilizing resources, and then they can do more. And now that we're in this weird iteration of game consoles, which is how I play games, that we've gone, the generations of the consoles have kind of like gotten weird, where it's like, 2 years, I guess I've had my Xbox or whatever, my PlayStation, for so long, and now each Microsoft and Sony now are offering even higher definition versions of the consoles. So now, like, there's the PlayStation 4 Pro, which it does some kind of version of 4K, and it ups the resolution. When all that stuff's in place, I think it's not another company could kind of go in and use the puzzle pieces and kind of create something. So I don't think that necessarily means like, oh, well, if DICE isn't personally involved, it's not going to be good. I think instead of reinventing the wheel, they're going to use the engine that they created for the game and just add, better, more variety and a slightly different experience. So,
yeah,
especially with the turnaround, it's going to be out in the 17th or something of November, and I'm sure it'll have a time. Yeah, it's November 17th.
All right.
So, yes, I'm gonna give it another try, and you'll definitely, if it's good or bad, you'll be hearing from it both ways from me.
All right. Well, yeah. So, like I said, there was stuff in there that looked cool to me, but as someone who's not going to play it, I wanted to get your perspective.
How do you know you won't play it? Maybe you'll buy a console this year.
Maybe.
Treat yourself.
At least is currently constructed.
All of a sudden, John just really gets into video games, and everything goes by the wayside.
Mm-hmm.
Are you like one of those people that's like when you start playing, you can't stop?
No, not usually.
I'm not either. That's the one thing. Like, I feel bad for people who get like addicted to games, but it's like I was thinking about this. It's like I'm terrible about. I'm still playing Skyrim, and it's. I'll like play it for 20 minutes, then I stop, and then I go do the dishes, and I come back and play it for 20 more minutes. Like, I don't think I'm actually could ever get addicted to video games. There's just not enough meat on the bone, so to speak, to take over from real life. So I guess we've been going a while, but we probably should wrap up, huh?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap up.
I want to ask you one more question, though.
All right.
About Celebration. So the one thing that we completely glossed over from panels was the 40th anniversary panel, which was that big reveal that John Williams showed up and did a musical tribute to Carrie Fisher. What was your takeaway on that?
I thought it was really nice, and certainly, I guess it. Here's the thing. So it certainly started out as a musical tribute to Carrie Fisher. They played. So it was John Williams, and I don't think the whole symphony, but a decent portion of the Orlando Symphony Orchestra. They played Leia's theme. They played the throne room music, right? When she bestows the medals on the heroes at the end of A New Hope, I'm pretty sure that's what they played second. And then, the Rebel fanfare, the opening music, Star Wars music, and then the Imperial March, right? So it kind of turned into just like, John Williams is here. It sort of became a salute to Star Wars music generally. Not that was necessarily what they intended, but obviously if you're going to have John Williams there, right? If they're performing Star Wars music, they're going to perform the Imperial March, right? Like you can't not perform that. Even though that really has very little to do with Carrie Fisher or the character of Princess Leia. So, I thought it was very nice. The problem there was the feed kept buffering, and not just for me, but I think people all over the place. I would see stuff. So, it would sound great, and then suddenly it would just like freeze and then skip ahead. But I thought it was really nice it was a nice gesture to have to kind of cap off that panel, right? Because they had done the video tribute to Carrie Fisher prior to that, and then to have him come out with the Orlando Symphony, or not the Orlando Philharmonic. There's not much of a difference between those terms, but the Orlando Philharmonic, and play Princess Leia's theme. I thought that was a really nice way to cap off that kind of video tribute, and then the rest of it was icing on the cake. So I thought it was really nice. But what did you think?
Yeah, no, I liked it. I had the same streaming issues that you think. It was kind of funny. I was running down Twitter and seeing like people like Kate from Blob of the Hut podcast kind of like going, am I the only person that's having streaming issues? And I'm like, oh, thank goodness I'm not it's just not like that thing where it's like, oh, if I'd only rebooted my modem before this, I wouldn't have had to. So I guess we were all kind of in the mix together with that problem. Again, Star Wars, Verizon will pay for it, get more servers, open them up. It's there's a whole aspect to people that don't want to actually have to like walk the aisles of those conventions to be able to enjoy all this. So yeah, it would have been.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like not as exciting as say like when the Force Awakens thing, when they came out and they all got treated to a concert. You know, it was very kind of like, let's just have him come out there. He does a couple themes, gets on his plane and goes home, which is, you know, it's cool. It's like, again, it's kind of indicative of kind of like that weird subtext of like, say, the way they promoted Force Awakens versus this Last Jedi. Again, it felt more perfunctory. And I guess that's the thing that we're going to have to, going forward, we're going to have to understand, because I think even more so as Star Wars goes on, there's going to be a lot more people where they're, you know, the vector where they came to Star Wars was the Clone Wars and Rebels. And I don't know who said this. It may have been Dave Filoni. It might have been somebody else, but really that is for some people that is important or more important than say the original trilogies, which, you know, personally is like, ugh. That bugs me so much, but I also have to realize that that's what happens when time goes past and the things change. It's like you're not always going to be able to control. And I like this running joke I always say is that eventually they're going to announce that the original trilogy is no longer canon. But you know, that's kind of the way it's going to go. And I guess I either have to get with the program or I don't know, get really into like Dungeons and Dragons or something. But I think that's a good place to stop. We've got tons of stuff next week, or when we are doing next episode. We're going to talk next week about, you know, Carrie Fisher and where they are with her on episode 9, and speculating. There's some products coming out. There's a new book coming out, an anthology book. Is this the anthology book that we've been asking for the last few months? My quick first blush response, no. But we also have some comics and some toys and stuff. But that's all for next week. We have done a lot this week, and if you want to talk to us about it, the best way is to email us at hosts. That's host with an S at the end at talkingbirdcast.com. We are always lurking on Twitter at talkingbirdcast. We have a website at www.talkingbirdcast.com. We also have an Amazon affiliate link that we always appreciate that you use when you do, and if you're thinking about it still, is www.talkingbirdcast.com/Amazon. Did you have anything to add, John?
No, I hope people enjoyed Celebration. Like Robert said, we'll be back next week. Lots to talk about.
Yes. Thanks for listening, and may the Force be with you.
When I read 8, I told Ryan, I fundamentally disagree with virtually everything you've decided about my character. But, you know, other than that, I can't really describe more. But it was as shocking to me to read what Ryan had written as I'm sure it will be for the audience.
Do you make a turn to the dark side? Is that possible?
It's possible. Anything's possible. You know what happened? I read one theory and I said to Ryan, I said, this is the one I want to do. And it was...
Did you have a say in it?
No.